This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Last January, the Lancaster House speech, and I sat in this studio as somebody who'd fought against the Conservative Party for over 2 decades. I listened to what Theresa May had to say, and I said, wow, this is amazing. She's saying all the things I've been fighting for. It was all worth it. It's great. But it didn't take me very long through the course of a general election campaign to start to lose faith. And indeed, as early as last July, I wrote in the Daily Telegraph, the great Brexit betrayal has begun. I then wrote in September, the great Brexit betrayal continues. And after the various concessions made in December at the summit, such as 40 billion, I was barely able to contain myself. I don't think she's holding true to Brexit. I don't think she's right to be leader. And I think they're headed on a path of total destruction if she remains. That has been my view for months and months and months. And I know lots of you have been really, really angry with me, particularly Conservative voters, saying I'm rocking the boat, I'm causing trouble. Well, just look today, Jacob Rees-Mogg basically saying, look, unless they keep faith with Brexit voters, they may well lose the next general election. And former cabinet ministers like Theresa Villiers saying the whole thing is being watered down. But perhaps to get a bit more objectivity onto this than me, where I've nailed my colours to this mast. So clearly, I'm joined this morning by Isabel Oakeshott, political commentator, former political editor of the Sunday Times, a Conservative commentator without being a Conservative Party member. Isabel, good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'll try and be objective, but I'm probably about as wound up as you are at the moment. I think we're at a very, very dangerous point for Brexit, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we are. And it kind of seems to me that on the current course, the best we're going to get is Brexit in name only. And I say that because she seems to be dead set on taking us into this transition period. And yet, and Isabel, perhaps you can explain this to me. You know, why is it that when the prospect of a transition period, meaning effectively continued membership of the EU, but without any say, why did the Parliamentary Party put up with it back in December?
Well, I think that there is just so much fear within the Parliamentary Party of what happens if they pull the plug on this operation. And, you know, the reason that we're getting so much manoeuvring from a number of cabinet ministers and those outside the cabinet at the moment is precisely because this is a critical point in the Brexit negotiations. I could name, I think, at least 4 senior Tory party figures: Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary Gavin Williams, the Defence Secretary Priti Patel, the ousted International Development Secretary, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, who are absolutely on manoeuvres within the Tory party at the moment and are beginning to wonder whether this is their moment to strike against Theresa May. And I think it's fairly hanging in the balance for her. Perhaps that's overstating it a bit. I think there could either be a leadership contest that kicks off in the next few weeks. If that doesn't happen, she probably survives for another year, and everything that you and I fear about Brexit, that there is some kind of catastrophic sellout and this new thing, Brino, Brexit in name only, may come to pass. Yeah,
and of course we heard rumours yesterday that the transition, and I've been saying this again for months, that the transition period wouldn't be around about 2 years, it would actually be 3 years, which would then take us to the next general election.
Now, that really bothered me, and I think that is potentially dynamite. And I'm rather surprised, actually, that more papers this morning haven't picked up bigger on that story. You know, I always feared when they said around 2 years, that around 2 years meant nothing of the sort, that was close to 2 years and meant around 3 or maybe even 4. You know, you learn in political commentary and as a political observer to interpret language, and the word around is a dangerous one in this context, I think.
Now, a great favourite of this show, and I get texts and tweets, and they're all there. I've got a load of Rees-Mogg fanatics, and I think across all LBC programmes at Rees-Mogg. But it seems to me that he's gone from being amiable backbencher in the space of a couple of weeks to heading up this Conservative Party group. Can you explain what that group is and what this really means?
Well, I think there's no doubt that, certainly in my mind, that Jacob Rees-Mogg is serious about running for the Tory party leadership. You know, some people dismiss Jacob Rees-Mogg. One expression I've heard is that he's a kind of meme that's gone too far, a kind of human Boaty McBoatface, a national joke that's suddenly become all too serious. I think if anyone who is nerdy enough, like me, to have watched the video footage, the film footage of him dissecting the position of the Brexit Secretary David Davis in a parliamentary committee meeting last week, would not underestimate Jacob Rees-Mogg's intellect. You know, he is a forensic examiner of political positions, and you know, clearly he feels utterly passionately about the proper delivery of Brexit, and indeed has said nothing and nobody except the Queen is more important than Brexit to him. So I think what we're seeing is his leadership ambitions, but perhaps it's unfair to focus too much on that. It is more for him about Brexit being delivered in the way that 17.4 million people voted for, and where he becomes very dangerous to the Prime Minister is if he has enough of a group around him to really pose a difficulty for her when it comes to parliamentary votes. And, you know, really that's not actually that difficult, is it?
And, you know, I watched that exchange, and as you say, it was forensic, and David Davis kept laughing, and it was a very nervous kind of laughter. But isn't really, of all the figures in the cabinet, isn't the David Davis position the most curious of all? Because don't we know, listen, I shared platforms with him up and down the country, that Davis is the man who really wants us to crack on with Brexit, and yet is having to push what I see as a compromise line coming from a divided cabinet.
I'm bemused watching David Davis, who, like you, is somebody I've known for a very long time. I've got great respect for him. He has always been a staunch Eurosceptic, and when he was put in that position as Brexit Secretary, I found that immensely reassuring. And something odd has happened to him in recent months, or even, you know, perhaps it began to happen as soon as he got into government and realised, you know, just how difficult it was to carry out what he wanted to carry out. But I don't see the same man as I know. You know, he looks different. He looks tired. He looks as if he's finding it all. I mean, you know, he is, I don't know exactly how old he is, in his late 60s.
68, I think he is.
I think he's under an enormous amount of pressure. But it's interesting that Tory Eurosceptic MPs, the kind of Brexiteer, the harder Brexiteers, feel let down by him without a doubt.
I think that's right. And as I say, my sense of it is that actually what she's trying to do as Prime Minister is to keep all these different wings of the party happy. And that actually, by trying to keep everyone happy, in the end, you probably don't keep anyone happy. Lots of rumours, Isabel, the last two Sunday sets of newspapers, the number of signatures or letters that need to go in to trigger a leadership debate and contest is 48. Any gossip or rumours on where we are with that?
This is so difficult to nail, this one, because the man in charge of those letters, who collects them and keeps them in a safe, Graham Brady, who most people probably haven't heard of.
Hang on. I think you're wrong there, aren't you?
You think that they have?
No. He's just received a knighthood. He's now Sir Graham Brady.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And isn't the timing of that interesting?
Well, I look forward to the day when I'm going to be addressing you as Sir Nigel Farage.
I shouldn't think so, no.
But Sir Graham is extremely discreet. That's why he's lasted so long, and probably why one of the good reasons he got his knighthood. So he never lets on how many letters he's got. But I think it is the case that there are so many that we are sufficiently near the tipping point of the 48 for anyone who's wavering about putting in a letter to be thinking rather harder than they might do if they thought that there were only 3 letters in that safe. You know, they are now faced with a kind of knowledge that if they put a letter in, they might just be the individual that tips the party into a leadership crisis. And that probably makes people think twice, 3 times, maybe even 4 times before they take that step.
So if they don't reach the 48, she stays on as leader. The trade negotiations begin at the summit on March the 22nd, 23rd with Monsieur Barnier and our friends over there. But the other interesting thing, of course, is we've got local elections coming up in May of this year.
And make no mistake, the Conservatives are terrified of what's going to happen in those elections. There is a widespread expectation that there will be wipeout and a great deal of fear about that and the consequences of that. But no, what I don't detect, conversely, is any sort of great plan of how to make sure that doesn't happen. There's almost a sort of attitude that it's inevitable, that it's going to be a disaster and, you know, it's too late to do anything about it.
So those elections come in May, and let's say she survived for now, and those elections are a disaster. There's a possibility then that they reach the number 48. You see, what I'm getting to is this Brexit timetable is, and you know, I went to see Monsieur Barnier myself the other day, very clear about it, that the negotiations on trade are to end in October before we go through parliamentary ratification. Are they going to make this timetable?
It seems a little doubtful, given the EU's history of, as you would know far better than I, of handling these things. Not that there's a comparable situation, but it's not the most efficient of machines. And then let's not forget that everybody disappears for at least all of August.
Oh, and half of July.
Of them disappear for much of the summer. So I think it is going to be tight. Both sides obviously are extremely incentivised to try to come to an agreement. The other thing that was raised to me this morning was actually what happens if the lawyers get involved on the EU side. You know, my goodness, God help us. You know, we'll be here until the next millennium.
Well, if all goes well for Theresa May, then she will negotiate some kind of deal. It will pass through Parliament, which is not certain, but let's just assume.
I love the way you say that, as if it might be a smooth process.
Well, it won't be, but I'm just thinking that on the current timetable, the next election would be in 2022. But it may well come sooner than that. Are the Tory party, in your opinion, on their current course, doomed to losing the next election?
I think I would be a bit of a fool to make predictions. My predictions have all been a bit rubbish in recent years. I think many in my industry would be able to relate to that. It doesn't feel good, I must say. It absolutely doesn't feel good. I've just come off the BBC with Jeremy Corbyn, and I'm sorry to say that, you know, he's actually much more impressive than many of us on the right have given him credibility for. I think that the Conservatives have a lot to be worried about, but that said, it's a long time away, and there is an immense opportunity for us in Corbyn's kind of socialism.
And he's got a slight spring in his step, Corbyn, hasn't he?
Well, I think he's had a spring in his step for a long time.
Yeah,
you know, it's all going pretty swimmingly for him, and you know the local elections are expected to go well. He's got London. You know, he's asked about Brexit, says nothing. It's not too difficult for them, and gets away with it. Yeah, well, we're certainly headed for fascinating times. Look, Isabel Oakeshott, former poll head of the Sunday Times, political commentator, and conservative-leaning, not supporter of the party, but conservative causes. I'm happy with that.
Thank you for coming in this morning. And look, I'm going to take your calls now, because, hey, LBC is the one place on a Sunday where you, the public, have your say. Is the Tory party on its current course doomed? And I would say without a doubt, but that's my view. Tell me I'm wrong by calling 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 11:15. Is the Conservative Party doomed on its current course? And are we going to get Corbyn, perhaps in a coalition with the SNP next time round? My view is that she's not leading the party. She's trying to placate two different wings of it, and it simply isn't working. Unless she goes, I think it's all over. What does Annabelle in Twickenham think? Good morning.
Hello, Nigel. I think before the election, there was a Tim and Fiona.
Yes.
And everything was on course.
Now, just to explain, Annabelle, to people, Tim and Fiona were there in number 10, effectively running the campaign and acting as the gatekeeper for Theresa May.
Yes, but now the skullduggery begins, that new advisers were appointed, and they were Hayward, and I will tell you this, I know who's been giving her the scripts.
Okay.
Gavin Barnwell.
Barwell. Yes.
He was voted out at the last general election.
Yep.
And yet he is working for her as her advisor.
He lost a seat in Croydon, didn't he?
Yes, he did. And what is more is, I don't think, and there was news today on the papers, I don't know whether it's true, but they've given Theresa May an ultimatum. It's either her or Hammond that goes, because I think that what he said at Davos I think, that has got a lot of their fire up.
Doesn't Hammond keep on doing this, Annabelle? I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it?
All of the time.
It's really interesting that here we've got Trump at Davos saying one of the reasons America's doing great is we've deregulated. I've got rid of 22 laws for every new one I've made.
But he is the fly in the ointment.
Free everything up, and yet Hammond at Davos is saying we want to keep all the European Union rules for at least the transition period and maybe on into eternity. So is there a possibility here, Annabelle? What if Hammond was got rid of? Would she then look a bit more coherent as a leader?
Yes, I think definitely.
Right.
Definitely. Excuse me, please.
That's all right.
Excuse me. I think she would, because I think that it can't be both of them. They can't both stay in. I think that it's either got to be a Hammond or her.
Right.
So I think that...
so she needs to go up to him and say, this house ain't big enough for the both of us, yeah?
Yes, and I think that... I think he's working for the EU.
Okay, Annabelle, I tell you what, in my view, it's not just him, there's lots of them. John is calling from Hailsham in East Sussex. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Nigel. I'd like to say, for all serious Brexiteers out there, well, I think we're all in dismay at the Tory party and the way they're negotiating with Europe at the moment. And obviously, we all seriously worry the deal we're going to get is going to be, totally useless. And we do really need a few Tory MPs out there with the same sort of balls and upfront personality that Donald Trump's got, because half the time we don't really know what they're thinking, do we?
No, we don't, and they sort of hedge around, don't they?
Yeah.
But okay, so John, you're a frustrated Brexiteer, and Jacob Rees-Mogg is saying, unless Brexit gets delivered properly, people won't vote for Conservative at the next general election. Is Rees-Mogg right to think that?
I really think he's, Nigel, and to be honest with you, I mean, a lot of people at the moment would not want to vote for the Tory party as it stands at the moment. Certainly, if they make a complete hash-up of Brexit, they're going to lose a lot of votes. But the problem we've got, us Brexiteers, what is the alternative? I certainly don't want to see a left-wing Labour government running my country, but what is the alternative? This is a major problem we're going to have, isn't it?
I think that will be, if things continue as badly as they are, John, that will be a debate, unless, of course, we see a strongly rejuvenated UKIP or something like it, because it's worth remembering, it's really worth remembering, that the only reason the Conservatives got a majority in 2015 is because the UKIP vote, the near 4 million votes, hurt the Labour Party a lot more than it hurt the Tory party. And I do think, and UKIP's got its problems at the moment, goodness me, yes, but
I really do think, Nigel, I have actually been a UKIP supporter in the past. Unfortunately, they've had a lot of bad press, with the last leader. They just sort of had to depose. I mean, I really do feel that if UKIP could come forward with someone really credible, they would have a chance again. Obviously, I think they did the right thing, deposing the leader they just had. He did have some serious flaws. He hasn't gone yet.
They've tried to depose him, and there is going to be an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting on this on the 17th of February. But John, the general point is that it's interesting to think that traditionally people said a strong UKIP would hurt the Conservative Party, but a really strong UKIP hurt the Labour Party even more. So let's wait and see what emerges. John, thank you. And John, very much taking that Rees-Mogg line, that if the party that was elected to deliver Brexit doesn't actually do it, or does it in such a brino, Brexit in name only, Isabel Oakeshott talked about that just a moment ago, that if it does that, a lot of people will just stay at home and will get a Corbyn government. And that wouldn't worry Brexiteers so much if Corbyn had stuck to his own traditional Brexit position. Instead, the Blairites appear to be in charge of the Parliamentary Labour Party, and I would guess probably the writing of the next manifesto too. I don't know. Elizabeth is calling from Shrewsbury. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Nigel. Having listened to Jeremy Corbyn this morning, I would like to call for a general election in the spring of next year. And just as Jeremy has been, and I'm previously a Conservative voter, he has garnered the youth vote. What have we as older voters got to lose by getting behind the Labour Party now. The way the Conservatives are delivering Brexit is an absolute traitorous betrayal of 17.4 million people. And I say, a plague on all their houses, and let us have a general election in the spring.
So, Elizabeth, this is fascinating. So you are a passionate Brexiteer, and I can tell that. But you frankly think the Tories are doing it so badly that it wouldn't make much difference if Labour were in.
I think that Theresa May and some of her cabinet have thought that those of us that voted Brexit were so stupid and thick that we would believe their lies. And unfortunately, they managed to garner support from some of the wonderful people that are trying to steer Brexit in the way that we all voted for. And we now, there's only two of us obviously in our house, but we listened to Jeremy Corbyn, and our attitude now is, let's give him a chance. And I hope that at the local elections in May, the Conservatives are given the biggest beating electorally that they've ever had.
If the Conservatives, Elizabeth, to whom you're naturally aligned, and you said that earlier, if they were to get a new leader who was absolutely clear on Brexit delivery, would that then change your mind back in favour of the Conservatives?
It would make us think that the Conservatives were a party who were for the people. And let's not forget, Nigel, we see all these politicians at the top pontificating about, as Hammond said at Davos, I have given the NHS. No, Mr. Hammond, you didn't give the NHS a penny.
It's our money.
It's our money.
Yep.
And the way the older vote feels now, they're making us sell our homes to pay for our care and waiting until we're in agony for hip and knee operations. Let's go with Labour and let's see how they give the elderly dignity.
Fascinating. Elizabeth, that is an absolutely fascinating phone call. I thank you for it. And I haven't heard that argument directly before, but I have to say, I always apply the supermarket test. What do people say to me as I'm going round the supermarket? Because I do go shopping. I buy the essentials, gin, tonic, stuff like that, lemons occasionally. And people do stop me and want to talk to me, and it's really interesting. And one of the things I've been consistently getting for the last few weeks are people stopping me saying, I voted Brexit. This woman does. Are we going to get it, Mr. Farage? Is it actually going to happen? And people are genuinely, really, very, very worried indeed. John from Wales says, morning, Nigel. I would like Hammond replaced. That's a theme that's developed in the last half an hour. Maybe if Hammond went, things might just be okay. I'm not sure. I think it needs much more fundamental change than that. I sense Brexiteers are fuming with Mrs May, and Rees-Mogg is right. They're not going to vote Tory unless something big changes. What I mean by that is they're doomed unless something big happens. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 11:30. Tory party in deep, deep trouble. Something's got to give. But before I get there, proposal now in Wales to lower the voting age for the elections there in 2022 to the age of 16. And of course, this follows similar moves that have happened in Scotland and a bigger debate in the United Kingdom. I am opposed to this. I do not believe you should vote in elections that you're not eligible to stand for. And I don't think the idea of 16-year-old MPs or councillors actually makes any sense at all. If it does come to pass, and clearly it's Labour pushing this, of course there's the argument that there's bias in schools and that will generally lead people to be more left of centre. But there's a much more important argument than that, and you can debate the validity of that argument. And it's this, that generation live on their mobile phone devices, they live on social media, and the Labour Party and Momentum and others are getting quite good at this. Theresa May's Tory party are utterly useless at it, and the Tories need to get a grip on this very, very quickly indeed. But back to the Tories' trouble. I wrote in the Telegraph last July that the great Brexit betrayal had begun. A few people thought I was running a bit ahead of myself there, but hey, there's quite a lot more people saying it now. Fascinatingly, Jacob saying, you know, they won't vote for us next time if we don't deliver it. Our last caller before the break, Elizabeth, saying she's a Tory, a Brexiteer, but hey, what difference would it make if Labour won? And Tony from Pevensey Bay says, Nigel, I've never ever voted Labour. However, because Theresa May is so hopeless at negotiating our exit from Europe, I will at the next election. Despite the fact that Corbyn isn't really offering us anything positive when it comes to Brexit. In fact, his position from a Brexiteer's point of view is now considerably worse than that of the Tories. But hey, that's where we are, and people are getting pretty angry when I meet them going around the supermarket. Lorraine is calling from Chelmsford. Good morning, Lorraine.
Good morning, Nigel. I would just like to say that this is just another betrayal of the UK in the favour of the EU. We were betrayed by Ted Heath, who illegally took us in the first place, John Major signing the Maastricht, and Gordon Brown with the Lisbon Treaty. Theresa May is not negotiating this. This is being negotiated by the likes of Ollie Robbins, who's been moved out of the Treasury into actually number 10 as her advisor on Europe and anything Brexit.
This is Lorraine, just to stop you for a second, because not everybody will know his name. So what we're talking about here, Lorraine, is the massive influence of the civil service, yeah?
Exactly. Now, the civil service, be it the Treasury, Whitehall, etc., are running the shots here, and they always have done. They've all been indoctrinated in the way of common purpose. Now, if people don't know what common purpose is, they ought to look it up.
Yeah, okay. We won't delve into that now, Lorraine.
No, okay, then we won't delve into this. But the thing is, the people now are more educated in what this is all about, Nigel. It's about a betrayal. They're betraying the people of this country in favour of the global corporations and the banks. The politicians, our parliamentarians, have vested interest in the EU. It's all about money for themselves.
Lorraine, if you're right in your analysis of all of this, does that mean, on their current course, under Theresa May, that they are doomed to losing the next election?
Nigel, shall I tell you how I feel? As somebody that hates the EU, I love Europe, like yourself, and I love different countries and their cultures and identities. This is what makes the world such a fascinating place. And as you know, they want to destroy that.
No, I agree with that. But Lorraine...
Yeah, my point is, Nigel, if we don't get out of the EU completely, this country is finished anyway, and so let it become communist, because I would have lost all faith in democracy and sovereignty.
No, Lorraine, very passionate, very strong. You're not alone, Lorraine. I'm meeting you around the supermarket aisles. Now, look, surely there must be somebody out there who thinks the Tories are doing a good job. Somebody out there, please call me and tell me that Mrs May is doing it brilliantly, and they're going to walk the next election with a monster majority. Please tell me. You must exist. Someone must be out there. Even if you're a sitting MP who rings up anonymously, you can call 0345 60 60 973. David, a first-time caller from Mill Hill, is ringing. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. First of all, I saw Jeremy Corbyn on the Biased Broadcasting Corporation this morning. I mean, honestly, we have to get rid of her. She has to get out. She has to take Hammond with her. How can we have a cabinet that is not a Brexit cabinet? It doesn't make sense. She's got a load of people in there that are against Brexit. I mean, it's just wrong.
I know. And David, she'd even appointed Lord Adonis to a post, who is just about the most fanatical EU person I've met in my life.
I'd like to ask you something else.
Yeah.
What about the accounts, the EU accounts? Have they been agreed?
Well, they've not been signed off as a full and true accurate record for 20 years because there are problems, billions missing, talk of fraud, etc. But that's not the debate this morning, David. The debate this morning is that we have a Tory party that says it will deliver Brexit, but wants to give us transition, wants us to be aligned incredibly closely.
They're assaulting our intelligence, Nigel, the way they're doing it.
Yeah. I mean, David, have you been normally a Conservative voter, David?
I have been for many, many years.
Okay.
But I mean, I couldn't bring myself to vote for Labour because I just watched Corbyn on the television, and to me, I just don't agree. And having his a Chancellor of the Exchequer there as well, taking the money and redistributing it. They haven't thought it through. They want to give £10 an hour to everyone. How many businesses will close because of that? And that means the unemployment will go up, and that means that they don't care about
and David, let alone what they would do to high earners, and we'd see the 1970s-style brain drain happening all over again. And I fear that. I'm old enough to remember it, and I fear that too. But David, would you go out and vote for Theresa May if the other prospect was Corbyn, or if she sells out on the EU, would you simply just sit on your hands?
Survive. I can't believe she's going to survive, because it's just ludicrous, her situation. She's not a Brexiteer, and she was made Prime Minister. It's an insult to us. The fact that it doesn't make sense.
David, it's Sunday morning. You've got to calm down, mate. I do understand how you feel. And that's why you picked up the phone for the first time ever to LBC. Thank you, David, very much indeed for your call. Well, let's move on to David in Worksop. David, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. Morning. Just a quick call. I'm sorry, but I think Theresa May needs to go now. We are going absolutely nowhere. And what you're asking the question, would people continue to vote for the Conservatives? The problem we've got, if you want Brexit, where else do you go? It's partial Conservatives, but every other party, apart from UKIP, is wanting to remain, and that's the problem people will have if there is another election.
Yeah, at the moment, David, the Tory party say they're delivering Brexit. I saw the effective Deputy Prime Minister Liddington this morning. Oh no, we're carrying out the will of the people. But I think, David, the scales are beginning to fall from people's eyes, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is an absolute hero. We need somebody like him, and because he'll cause a catalyst of other people who think like him to start coming out and saying, well, we're not doing what we've been asked to do. And I'd love him to be the Prime Minister, I really would.
Well, let's see. I felt a bit sorry for Jacob yesterday, because looking at the Times newspaper cartoon, this story, David, in the last week of the two monkeys that have been cloned.
Yeah.
And it had and the two monkeys were Rees-Mogg and myself. And I felt a bit sorry for him. They're going to lump him in with me and everybody else. David, I think to people of a certain political persuasion, Jacob is, becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger figure. But the argument is, David, in places like Worksop, as we head up towards the north in Nottinghamshire, that he's just too posh.
I know, and we see we've got a really good Brexit MP. John Mann's a good MP. But the problem, I think, is a lot of people in the north won't vote Conservative, even though they want Brexit.
No.
And that's where UKIP plugged that gap.
That's right, and that was what hurt Miliband so much in 2015, gave Cameron the surprise majority, and delivered the referendum. David, I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. If May does not deliver the Brexit we voted for, 17+ million people will never trust the Tories again, and they will be finished, say Linda and David. Well, some people will still vote Conservative because they'd always vote Conservative, and some people are going to vote Conservative because they fear Corbyn and some real left-wing economics. The question, I think, really, and there may be one or two that switch to Labour, the question really is, you have to, at elections, you have to have your people motivated to go out and vote, and there are a lot, I suspect at the moment, of Conservative-inclined people who were pro-Brexit who do not like one little bit the direction all of this is going in. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's now 11:45. I've said for months I think May's the wrong leader, that Brexit is being watered down and betrayed, and that it's going to do them an awful lot of harm. Many more people now saying that. Jacob Rees-Mogg hinting over the last couple of days it could cost them votes at the last election, but today on Peston saying, I'm fully supporting the PM because we need to have stability during the negotiations. It makes more sense to back the leader who has a clear position on Brexit. It's a bit like saying the football club, isn't it? We have every confidence in our manager, and then he's gone within 48 hours, and we've seen that a few times. But let's keep your views on this coming in. Are they doomed, the Tories, on their current course? I'm going to go to the Isle of Wight and speak to Billy. Good morning, Billy.
Good morning, Nigel. Great to talk to you. I really do think the Tory party is doomed, because I've previously voted Conservative, and I did vote for the Conservative Party in this last election.
Yep.
And unless they get their act together, and that is, of course, going to be without Theresa May as the leader, then I'm going to have no choice but to vote for an alternative party, and that would have to be the Labour Party. But I don't want to do that, and I think they need to bring in someone like Daniel Hannan, who actually knows what he's talking about, who can actually deal with problems sensibly, and is a strong Brexiteer.
But isn't known with the public at all. That would be the problem. Billy, you talk about voting Labour. Are you happy with Corbyn's position on the European Union?
I'm not happy with his views at all, actually, on the European Union, because he's not given any view at all.
Well, I tell you what, Billy, let's have a little listen, because Corbyn was on the Mar programme this morning, and he was asked the question, would a future Labour government keep the UK inside the customs union? Here's his response.
We would want a form of customs union. Obviously, whether it would be the customs union, answer no, because it would require being a member of the EU, which we're not.
Well, we could agree to be in the customs union without being a member of the EU.
We would need to
be
sure that any agreement with the EU gives us the chance to influence this situation we're in and the trading relationships we want. Now, look, I would want to see trade relations with the rest of the world going on and increasing, of course, but also I would want to see conditions put on those trade, conditions of environmental protection, conditions of human rights, conditions of workers' ability to represent and negotiate themselves. The EU has
that, be a different kind of customs union.
In some form, both in the customs union and within its trading relations, but often not enforced. Surely we want to be an influence for good in the world.
So there you go, Billy. That was Corbyn accepting that if we've left, but actually wanted to keep us incredibly close to the European Union. Would you be happy to vote for that?
Well, after hearing that, Nigel, and I'm very grateful for you actually playing that as well to me and your listeners, I wouldn't, and it puts me in a very difficult situation, because I don't know, to be honest with you, Nigel, and I'm not even joking here, I don't think I'd have any other choice but to vote for the Monster Reagan Looney Party at the moment.
Well, they've had some
alternative.
Billy, they've had some great policy successes over the years. In the 1963 manifesto, one of the things that David Sutch proposed was the all-day opening of pubs, which in those days seemed ludicrous. And hey, it's kind of happened. Billy, the reason I played you that clip is, you know, we've had a few of you this morning come on the show to say, look, we're Brexiteers, she's betraying us, it's no blooming good, we'll have to vote Labour. But I just don't think people realise that although Corbyn, in his manifesto in June, talked about not just leaving the European Union, but leaving the single market, taking back control of our borders, there has been a transformation. They've done a 180-degree turn, the Labour Party, and they now basically want to stay in everything. Talk about Brexit in name only, it would appear that may as well be at the top of Corbyn's manifesto. Billy, I thank you for the call. I understand your frustration and your confusion. There are a lot of people out there feeling just like that. Dear Nigel, I'm 18 years old and strongly against lowering the voting age. At that age, I feel people can be too impressionable. And unfortunately, there is a great issue within schools where teachers spread their political views, which are typically one-sided, is a response I get from a young voter, as I commented at the bottom of the hour, that I don't think reducing the voting age to 16 is a good and sensible thing to do. Phil is in Enfield. Good morning, Phil.
Hello, Nigel. A lone voice.
What, you're the lone voice, Phil?
Yes, I'm a lone voice.
Go on, then.
A heartfelt voice. Theresa May, I admit, appears insipid. But I admire her because she's been knocked around from pillar to post. She's been subjected to so much criticism. But she's brave and she's diligent and she holds the ring. There are a lot of people who talk a brave fight, heckling outside that ring, but they couldn't go in there and stand it. I think we should cut her some slack. I believe she's doing the best she can, and I think sometimes it's better to have a rather insipid person than a colourful personality who can take us to hell in a handcart. And I did vote to leave, by the way.
Yeah, Phil, I'm often told that and I'm probably myself a little bit biased in favour. I like the big personality, just the way I'm made. But, Phil, what does she actually believe in, Phil?
I believe she has a sense of duty. I think she's genuinely decent, and I think if I were in her shoes, I'd be so worried about being seen to let down Brexit that ultimately she might put up all the stops and surprises. I think we should give her a chance, and I find myself feeling very sorry for her.
Well, I think on a human level, Phil.
Yes, but also I think she has got a track record of of experience, which many who shout the loudest do not have.
Yeah, and some would argue, Phil, it's very bad experience. Home Secretary, the longest-serving Home Secretary for 150 years, who presided over an immigration system that was completely, totally out of control. Phil, my problem is this, and I understand what you're saying. You know, it's damn difficult where she is. But when she's asked questions like, by Ian Dale, how would she vote if there's a referendum today? She can't answer the question. Phil, it's the lack of conviction, and it's this sort of... Janet Daly in today's Sunday Telegraph says she's like a middle manager. She doesn't have the skill set to be a leader that makes big decisions and has the vision.
Rather her being that than someone who thinks he's Winston Churchill when he's not.
OK, all right, Phil Malone voice from Enfield, I thank you. And I've got time for one last call this morning, and it's going to be Vic, who's calling from Shepherd's Bush. Good morning, Vic.
Good afternoon, Nigel. Lovely to talk to you, Nigel. I believe that she's finished, Nigel. And I really believe that it's going to be between either Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson.
Uh-huh.
I have no doubt about that at all, Nigel. None whatsoever. Sadly, people see her as a caretaker Prime Minister. And she's definitely going to be finished this year, Nigel.
So, with a new leader, Vic...
Sorry?
With a new leader...
Yeah.
Would you feel much happier voting Conservative and think that others would too?
And I think either Jacob or Boris will carry millions of more people on board. I think they have Jacob doesn't have the personality of Boris, but he has that way about him that people love him, Nigel.
Well, some do, and I mean, not all do, Vic.
Really, really important. Coming up to the...
OK, yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine. Vic, I thank you. I actually have got time for one last call. Colin, first-time caller to the show from Chester. Good morning, Colin.
Good morning. How long have I got? About 10 seconds.
You've got 35 seconds. Go for it.
Okay, I've got 2 points. I think that it's a very clever game they're playing. What do the EU want to see over the table when they're negotiating? Or rather, what don't they want to see? They don't want to see Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg. They want to see Theresa May, don't they?
It suits them perfectly, yeah, because we'll go on paying money and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so they don't want to give us a hard time in negotiations because she'll go and end up with somebody that they don't want to see. So it could be part of a strategy, I think.
Could be.
Negotiations are about to start.
But Colin, given that our time is desperate, I'm sorry, but do call again. I know you're first-time caller. Let me ask you very quickly, Colin, are the Tory party doomed on their current course with her as leader?
No, I don't think so.
You think so? All right, Colin, I've got to go. That's it. I can't do any more. I've run out of time. Lots and lots of opinion on this. Unsurprisingly, this one will run and run and run. I've been saying for 7 months now that the Brexit policy is wrong. They're losing key support. You heard it here first. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm back tomorrow evening here at 7 o'clock. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, it's Alex Salmond. But up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, people aged 16 and 17 could soon be able to cast a vote in Wales under plans to modernise elections.